Mm.
Well, thanks for the work anyway on the backgrounds, Anne.
There we go.
Great. Anne, are we ready to begin? You want to give me the thumbs up? Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our fiscal year 2027 budget town hall with Chair Vega Peterson. I'm going to kick it over to her to give us an introduction, and then we will have our budget director, Christian, talk through the budget numbers with us a little bit and what we're facing this year. And then Chair Vega Peterson will talk a little bit about her priorities and how she's planning to put together her executive budget this year. So with that, I'll turn it over to the chair.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all so much for taking time on a Saturday morning to join to talk about the budget outlook for Multnomah County for this next fiscal year and to share your thoughts and questions about what your priorities are, what your interests are for the work that we're going to be doing as we put together my executive budget. I wanted to start off though by really thanking my team, my staff for putting all of this together. This is, I think, the fourth year that we've been doing a town hall and gathering information for putting my budget together. And there's so many folks on my team, Sarah and Christian, who you'll hear from later, Tasia, who's helping to make sure all of this runs smoothly, and a lot of other folks who put this together. So I want to thank everyone for making this opportunity possible. But the reason that we're doing this is, is that this is a challenging budget year that's coming up. And it's important to me to hear from you. This is my fourth and final budget that I'll be putting together as the Multnomah County Chair. And like last year, it's definitely going to be a challenging one. That's something that we know for sure. We're looking at the second year in a row where we're expecting a deficit. And there's really no escaping the fact that the reality is that there are going to be cuts that are going to be required across the county. And obviously, that is going to have an impact on the services that we provide to the community that people rely on. So that's why it's really important to me to be able to hear from you during this, to understand what your priorities are, what are your concerns as we're putting together our fiscal year 27 budget. That's a budget that's going to start July 1st of 2026 and goes through June 30th of 2027. I've always felt strongly that the budget is about numbers, but it's also a moral document. And it's not just a moral document, but it is also our plan for how we can provide support and stability to the community, to Multnomah County in these challenging times. And I think we've all seen over the last several months just how much it matters what local government, what state government is doing in these times as we're seeing the impacts of federal administration's actions and policies that have been so devastating to our community. So now we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the agenda for today. So for the first half hour, Christian Elkin, who is the county's budget director, and I will be talking about the FY 27 budget process. Then for the next hour, I'm going to be answering your questions, which you can submit by typing in the chat at any time during the presentation. After the presentation, you can also use the raise hand function if you want to come off mute and speak, but you can always use the chat if that's more comfortable for you. We're going to switch between chat questions and raised hands. We'll try our best to get to everyone in the time that we have. And just a reminder that this town hall is being live streamed. It's also being recorded. So just be mindful of your language and your words today. But we do want to make this available for folks who weren't able to come today to view it later if they'd like. So lastly, there are many ways besides the town hall this morning to engage in the FY 27 budget. I encourage you to take my budget priority survey. That survey is open now. It is closing on February 22nd, so you still have time to fill it out. Once my budget is released, we move into the public budget cycle where the Board of Commissioners are going to be discussing the budget, making decisions about the budget in the public forum. And we have 3 public budget hearings during that time. The first is on April 29th. The second is on May 13th. And the last one is on May 22nd. And that's another great opportunity for you to share your thoughts directly with your local county commissioners and myself. As always, you can reach us by email, by phone, or again at one of those future town halls. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to get Christian's presentation started.
So again, good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Ryan, and I work for Chair Vega Peterson. And I just have a quick couple slides to ground everyone in the county and the work that we do. Next slide, please. So this is the districts that are in the county. If you live in Multnomah County, you are either in districts 1, 2, 3, or 4. And the chair represents all of the districts of the county. And so it's important as you're thinking about your budget advocacy to know which district you live in and who your commissioner is. So District 1 is Commissioner Moyer, and that's mostly southeast, a little inner northeast. District 2 is Commissioner Singleton. District 3 is Commissioner Brim Edwards, kind of inner southeast there. And District 4, mostly East County, the east side and the cities in East Multnomah County are represented by Commissioner Vince Jones Dixon. Next slide, please. And here's a picture of our commissioners with their districts listed next to them too. And with that, I will pass it over to Christian to go over the budget numbers with you all.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. My name is Christian Elkin. I'm the County Budget Director. I use she, her pronouns. And I just want to talk to you a little bit first about the budget process itself and make sure that we are giving you the important pieces of information so that you can track the budget, because it is a pretty big process. It's pretty robust. It takes a lot of time, but also we're preparing a pretty big budget. The county's budget was $4 billion last year. And we're going to talk a little bit about the funds that the county has greater control over versus funds that are kind of passed along to us from the state or the federal government to do specific services. So this past November, we started with the general fund forecast, which I will talk about in a moment, to really determine how much funding the county commissioners and the chair have to dedicate to services that are our most flexible. It's our most flexible pot of funding. So the county general fund is really where the county gets to make decisions about how to invest that funding. And that funding primarily comes from property taxes, business income taxes, and some motor vehicle rental taxes. So that really is local taxes being generated to support county government, and then the chair and the board are making decisions about that. So we prepare that forecast in November. It sets the tone. Then we release a lot of information to our departments so that they can start determining how they're going to allocate their funding and their resources and design their programs and the outcomes they're trying to achieve for the community. So during that time, between that first kind of yellow box with the pencil where we say we're preparing the budget, the departments are meeting with the chair's office, they're meeting with our COO, they're discussing operations, they're also discussing how other funding and grants and state funding, because a lot of times our programs have braided funding, how those impacts are going to be felt within their programs as well. So during that time, they're preparing that. Then we have everybody turn in their budgets to the budget office on February 6th. That happened on Friday. It was a big, exciting day at the county for us internally. And really that kind of kicks off where the public can kind of see that first stage or that first round of what the departments are prioritizing for their submitted and requested budgets. We will be releasing all of that information on our website on February 13th. We have to do a few little minor checks just to make sure that everything was submitted correctly and all of our funds balanced before we release it. So that will be coming out next Friday. I often see that as a Valentine's gift. So because that's the kind of person you get when you have a budget director, is they see getting budget submissions as a Valentine's gift. So between kind of the orange February requested and the purple, the proposed, is when the chair is going to have to look across all of the departments, because currently the budget is not balanced. The department submissions are requests and proposals, but it's not a balanced budget. And we know Oregon budget law tells us that we have to have a balanced budget. So by April 16th, the chair will have had to have made decisions across all 11 of our departments, all 500 program offers, and really set the priorities for the county. And I think that was one of the things that the chair is really, it's really important that she hears from community to understand what your priorities are so that she can take all that information and use it as she's having to make really hard decisions about what to fund and what not to fund, because you're going to see in a minute that unfortunately we don't have enough funding in the general fund and in our homeless services department to continue to fund the current service levels that we had in fiscal year 2026. So once the chair releases her balanced budget, which means all revenues are equaling all expenditures, unfortunately, we can't run a deficit like the federal government, then the board will do a technical approval that is part of Oregon budget law, and we will move right into a significant, between April and June, significant discussions. These are public discussions. They're available publicly. We will spend a lot of time in the boardroom going over the chair's budget, which is a balanced budget, and then having the community weigh in on that budget, having public hearings. We will hear from our community budget advisory committees. We will also have work sessions with department directors so that the board can hear and ask very important and detailed questions about the budget. And then we're scheduled to adopt the budget on June 4th. One of the pieces that happens when we adopt the budget is that if any amendment to the budget gets proposed, it has to still make the budget balanced at the end of the day. So if a commissioner says they want to maybe fund one program over another program or put funding in a different service area, then we either need to figure out if there's revenue available to support that program or that expansion or that new investment, or we have to cut expenditure somewhere else in the budget to make sure that the budget maintains its balance. So that's a really important part of the discussion. And it's also important to use the community, understand what phase of the budget process we're in so that we know, when we're getting closer to making kind of those final decisions for budget adoption. Then on July 1st, we begin to implement that budget, and then we'll start the whole process over again in the next fall. So if we can go to the next slide, please. One of the things that you all have been hearing in the newspaper, and not only for Multnomah County, but for the school districts, the city of Portland, and even the state, is that after a few years of increasing budgets, we saw some investments from the federal government. We had the American Rescue Plan funding. We saw some increases in our revenues as we were heading kind of out of COVID, is now we're starting to head into a more resource constrained environment. And I want to make sure that the numbers that you're hearing about out in the news and that we're releasing, we're making some distinctions between those numbers. So as I said before, the county general fund is really the most flexible revenue that the county chair and the board have to invest in their priorities. Right now, the county's general fund is looking at a $10.5 million budget shortfall, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. So let's put a pin in that number. But also more recently, there's been discussion that we also have a deficit in our homeless services department. And this is $87 million, and it is related to our supportive housing services measure. That measure was passed pre-COVID, and it passed in fiscal year 2020 or calendar year 2020. And at the time, we had anticipated that the funding would be around $90 million annually. It increased, and as we saw the tax revenues come in, anytime there's a new tax, we have to really adjust to that funding source. But what happened was, in order to understand why we're at this gap of $87 million, is that in the early stages of setting up the department, the services, and the programming, we were really ramping up. So there wasn't and understanding that the funding would be spent immediately because those programs had to be developed, they had to be established. It's a regional tax, so we're working with the regional government to ensure that we're setting regional goals around housing people, shelter services, behavioral health services, supportive services. So as we were ramping that up, every year we would have some underspending or some where we weren't fully programming all of the funding. So the initial 3 years of the supportive housing tax saw that our unanticipated revenue and underspending created some pretty large year-over-year funding balances. And those funding balances, it's important to remember, are all one-time only money because they're just the underspending from the previous fiscal year. It wasn't an increase in our revenues. A lot of that funding had been invested as part of an emergency response to people living unsheltered on our streets, and the short-term funding was used to fund shelters, day centers, and housing placements. As we head into fiscal year 2027, what we're seeing now is those parts of the system that were funded with that one-time only kind of emergency response funding, our forecast for that revenue is not able to keep up with the pace of those expenditures. So our carryover funds are almost gone in 2027 and leaving just the ongoing SHS funding to fund those services, which essentially does not leave us enough funding to sustain the system as it is currently exists. And you'll hear more about that as we go through the budget process. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this slide is really just showing the general fund forecast, that flexible funding that the board has the opportunity to prioritize. So going into fiscal year 2027, we're anticipating that we will have just under $790 million of general fund revenue. When we think about all of the services that the general fund is currently supporting in the current fiscal year, and then you inflate those to capture cost of living increases, inflation, as you all know, costs are rapidly increasing. We estimate that what we would need in expenditures or what we would need in revenue to cover our expenditures would be about $800 million. So you can see there that if our revenue is only $790 million and we need $800 million, that we have a gap from our revenues and our expenditures. That gap we call our structural deficit. And there's a couple of reasons why that exists for that $10.5 million. And that's because property taxes are our biggest source of revenue in the general fund. Property taxes by law, by Oregon state statute, can only grow by 3% annually. And unfortunately, we know that our expenditures, which are primarily personnel costs, which are salaries, benefits, PERS costs, medical, dental, health insurance costs, long-term insurance care, are growing by more than 3%. And that's where we start to see this structural deficit. If we look out over the next 5 years, if nothing is done, that structural deficit will grow to $30 million with some puts and takes kind of in there in the middle in fiscal year 2029 and 2030. At the county, we balance the budget every year. So at the end of this budget process, we will need to close that gap of $10.5 million to make sure that the 2027 budget is balanced. If we can go to the next slide, please. So a few of the budget constraints that we're facing that are leading to that gap and why our expenditures and revenues are not on par with one another is first, we know that we have declining downtown property values, and that is dragging down revenue growth in the core city and for our commercial buildings. So as those values continue to go down, we will see less property taxes collected related to those. We also know that labor costs are a major driver for the county, like we were just talking about. That's personnel costs and salaries, but that's also salaries. We do a lot of work with our community-based providers, and their salaries and costs are also going up as well. So what we're seeing is that as we see revenues declining, we're seeing our expenditures increasing. We also have one-time only resources available in our budget. We're we're pretty strict about how we use those, and we try to ensure that those are going to one-time only expenses like capital expenses, IT projects, pilot programs, and areas where we don't need additional ongoing funding in the next fiscal year. And then also what we're seeing is an increased demand for our county services. So not only are our revenues declining and our base expenditures are increasing, but as we have shifts in the community, we know that the county is the largest provider of social safety services. And so we are a safety net for Multnomah County. We're the largest safety net in Oregon. And as the economy begins to soften, or we see unemployment or the need for rent assistance as housing prices continue to escalate, we're seeing that increased demand for county services. And so we both have declining revenues and increased need in the community, which can create a lot of pressure on the county budget. So as the chair was saying, we know that we're going to face a few years of declining revenues and some pressure on the budget. And so we're really trying to set up the conversation and make investments that will get us through kind of this decline that we're seeing over the next 5 years. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Chair Vega Peterson.
Great. Thank you so much, Christian. Really appreciate all of that explanation and the deep dive into what the budget is looking like for this next year. Especially, I know we've had questions about, the difference between the general fund deficit that people were hearing about and the Homeless Services Department's deficit, and in those different funding sources definitely make a difference in the impacts there. So appreciate you doing that. We're really lucky to have you leading our budget work for the county, especially someone who considers, a bunch of budgets by department the best Valentine's gift they can get. So as Christian shared, the financial outlook for this next year is concerning, and it's going to continue to be so in the next several budget cycles. This isn't the first time that the county has experienced financial constraints. The Great Recession was a really hard time for our government as well as other governments. But it is a big departure from where we were 4 years ago when I was working on my very first budget as county chair. So back then, in 2023, the focus was really on a just recovery from the pandemic. And the need was as great as it is today. But the difference is that we had so much support from the federal government through ARPA funds that came through directly to us, that came through the state. And the economic impacts in the shifts in remote work patterns was just starting to be felt and understood in our community and communities all over the country. Today, 4 years on, the picture is much clearer. We know that it's going to take a lot of concerted effort from local and state governments and private sector partners to turn the economy around. And it's also obvious, unfortunately, that we are not going to be seeing relief from the federal government anytime soon. In fact, every government I talk to is gearing up for the impacts of the changes from HB1 and federal changes in federal policy. So more than ever before, it is going to be up to local governments and state governments and our local community to address the needs of our community. It's very true that you cannot do more with less, but I believe that we can always find ways to be more efficient and more effective, especially if we target the right types of programs and services, that we're collaborating with our partners so that we're not duplicating services and systems in inefficient ways. And one thing that is really important to me and has been something that I have stressed since coming into chair is operating as one county. And, one county is a really important mantra that I've used at the county since I've been at chair. It's been a priority in each of my budgets, but it's especially important this year. At its heart, what One County is about is a vision, is the belief that through strategic coordination, alignment across departments, communication across departments, we can share the best ways of working, we can find areas that need improvement, and we can strengthen our ability to deliver the essential services to our community. So in my term as chair, we have really laid a strong foundation to success around the One County vision. We have, in this time, we have renewed our mission, vision, and values for Multnomah County. That's the first time it's been done in in well over a decade. There we have a development of a new countywide strategic plan. That is something that was just finalized this past summer, and it's something that we're using actively that links our works across organizations to specific outcomes and significant improvements to align and centralize internal county services. And so the strategic plan is also something that that we are using to guide budget decisions and budget goals. That is something that is happening, across the county, and it's something that you can also find on our Multnomah County website if you're interested in learning more about that. We also created the homeless response system, and this is something that we worked very closely with the city of Portland and our East County cities, as well as other partners, to align our response to homelessness across departments, across jurisdictions. And that is something that continues to operate, and it really allows Multnomah County as a whole to operate under shared goals of how what our goals are in terms of addressing homelessness, and give us some guidance as we're making decisions in our respective jurisdictions around budgets to the best ways to meet those shared goals. I've also been a part of the work at the county and leading the work around the federal impacts work group. So I asked our COO and our department leaders to set up this federal impacts work group. It's comprised of leaders and staff from every single county department. And the goal of that is really to monitor and address the actions of this new federal administration. This is not splashy work, but it gives us a comprehensive understanding of what those impacts are, both across Multnomah County as an organization and for our partners as well. All of these things together is really key to understanding our organizational functions and tying those functions to the desired outcomes and make sure we're reaching them. And this is especially important, I would say, in the context of a constrained environment. The clarity that all of this work is giving us helps us find the right balance of direct services, administrative investments, with the ultimate goal of maximizing direct services to Multnomah County. And so can we go to the next slide? Because this next slide talks about the priorities that I have for this budget cycle, the priorities that I communicated to our county and department leadership in terms of what they should be thinking about as they're putting their budgets together. As I said before, like in a challenging budget environment, the ultimate goal of maximizing direct services to Multnomah County residents is key, particularly those who rely on us most heavily. The comprehensive view that we have helps us understand the impacts of any reductions, not just to clients or departments, but to the system as a whole. And really, my priority is to ensure that cuts on one end are not going to hinder services and outcomes elsewhere. The second priority you see here is around the priority that our services have to continue to prioritize our most vulnerable populations. And that means we do this through a commitment to equity and eliminating disparities. Even as we're navigating tough budget decisions and a federal administration that is openly hostile to those values, the goal of eliminating disparities and prioritizing services that focus on populations adversely affected by racism and additional socioeconomic conditions has to remain a core focus for Multnomah County. It's not just the right thing to do, but it also makes the biggest impact and achieves the best outcomes for everyone we serve. That is something that has been true at Multnomah County in my entire almost 10 years of being here. To that end, I've asked departments to work with our Office of Diversity and Equity to include clear and explicit analysis detailing the equity impacts in any proposed reductions in their budgets. Community voice is also key and will be centered in this process. This town hall is one of those ways, but we also have recommendations that we receive each year by the 11 community budget advisory committees across the county. That work has been key. I want to really applaud the work that is done by the county's Office of Community Involvement and Amada Perez for all of the work that's been done to really strengthen the work of those community budget advisory committees. I'm really excited for the way that this process is looking and the way that they're going to be able to participate in the budget this year. We have community engagement work that is happening, the town hall, the survey, the public budget hearings in the spring. And so all of that is key to shaping this budget. I feel like, the third priority is really maintaining programs with the best outcomes. And we know that the cuts that we may see in FY27 are going to be felt across our county. We can't forget that there are so many areas where the county is doing incredible work, and we have to maintain our focus and commitment in those areas. I will say that one of the areas I'm most proud of is our libraries. 2026 is a big year for our libraries. We just celebrated the opening of the new Northwest Library. And I'm really looking forward to the completion of our final library capital bond projects in 2026. We're going to have major openings of Belmont, of St. John's, the Hollywood branches, and most especially the brand new flagship library, the East County Library in Gresham. So we're going to have an opening of that later this spring, and I encourage everyone to visit this new flagship when it's open. It's going to be an incredible investment for our community. 2026 is also a really big year for Preschool for All, which is going to nearly double the program's current capacity next school year, taking us one step closer to providing universal preschool for every family and child who needs it. I hope there are folks who are familiar with Preschool for All here, but Preschool for All is the opportunity to provide a joyful, culturally responsive, quality preschool experience to every child, every 3 and 4-year-old in Multnomah County. These are generational investments that meet the needs of our community now and into the future. I am really committed to preserving the programs and services that are delivering the best outcomes and impacts for our community, like those two I just mentioned. In our behavioral health work, though, that's another one that is really critical for the work that's happening in our community. That includes the Behavioral Health Resource Center downtown. They celebrated their 100,000th visit this past year, which is incredible. So it is a resource for folks who are looking for resources downtown every day. It also includes the county's behavioral health call center that actually earned national accreditation from the American Association of Suicidology and consistently ensures that community members receive a behavioral health crisis response rather than a police response. So that call center has been an integral part of our response to behavioral health crises and needs in our community. I think as Christian, talked about earlier, some of the hardest decisions that we are going to make this year will concern our investments in homeless services. Our task is to ensure that we have the right balance between the number of shelter beds, the number of housing placements that we do, and the resources and services needed to effectively end people's homelessness. Multnomah County deploys a 3-part strategy to reduce unsheltered homelessness. So when we think about people who have no shelter right now, it really begins with a proactive, coordinated effort to find people living outside and build and trusting relationships that lead to service and housing connections. We're able to track our progress by getting people inside and on a pathway to a home of their own through a by name list of people experiencing homelessness, allowing us to better tailor services and to report outcomes. Guiding us through a tough budget is going to be one thing that's going to be key is our improved data systems. Also, the experience of our staff, close coordination with the City of Portland through the homeless response system on a joint investment strategy that avoids duplicating services. And that's something that's going to be key. That work is going to be critical. Some of the work that I'm most proud of is our housing placement and retention programs. We have the people that have been placed in housing in Multnomah County. We have seen 84% of people served remain housed after 2 years of receiving support. So people are getting housed and they are staying housed. We're providing far more services in our community to address homelessness than we had only just a few years ago. So we're going to continue to apply the lessons learned and make adaptations that strengthen our response so that people are accessing either stable housing or much needed services, and we'll be able to rely on those. There are so many other areas of the county that deserve attention and are going to be an important part of the work we're setting up for FY27 as well. Our elections divisions are getting ready to run the first in 2026 for the county, the first ranked choice voting. So we did that for the city last year. This year in 26, it's going to be for the county. So that will be a big change and something that we've been preparing for. Our public health programs, our youth services, the anti-poverty work that we do at the county through programs like Bienestar de la Familia, which serve our immigrant communities and more. So there are so many worthwhile things that are happening at the county, and all of and the good work that's happening is going to be a big consideration as we're thinking about those programs with the best outcomes. In sum, as a county, we have a mandate to respond to those in need. Some of those are legally required, and so also making sure that as we're looking at our budget for this year, that we are ensuring that we continue to do those services as well. We need to make sure that we're providing our services, demonstrating our leadership in increasingly difficult and unpredictable circumstances. That's what we've done, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And I will say, just to reiterate, in the context of a federal administration that continues to target our most vulnerable populations, our budget will be a model of what a responsive and compassionate government looks like. That is my commitment to you. So lots of information shared with you between myself and Christian to give you some idea of the direction that we're going and what our outlook looks like. But now I want to open it up and hear from you. I know we've had questions ahead of time before this town hall, and we've got some questions that have come in. So really appreciate, again, everyone being here, everyone who's participating, and we can open it up and turn it over to the Q&A portion of the town hall now.
Thank you for that, Chair Vega Peterson and Christian. That was a lovely overview. So we did receive a number of pre-submitted questions with your RSVPs and some in chat. So I'll be looking at those and asking the chair a few of the questions that we already got, and then I'll also be looking for hands up. And our team will make sure that we see the questions that are coming up through chat. Also want to let everybody know, Matt put this in chat, but that we will be sending out all the links and answers and a follow-up email to this as well. So to everybody who RSVP, we'll make sure to send you that information to the email you gave to us. So now I'm going to start with our first question, Chair. What do grassroots organizations need to prove to the county to receive impactful support so they may continue to serve the tens of thousands of the county's constituents?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to whoever submitted that question. I will say that in working with government contracting, there can be complexities in the process of receiving public funding, especially for smaller organizations. So one of the things that I've been working with our county leadership on is setting up some processes and opportunities designed to get funding to smaller organizations as we do the work to improve that experience. A couple of the ways that has shown up just in this last year is some of the work that we've done around getting dollars for food assistance funding. So knowing that grassroots organizations are closest to the work, and our commissioner offices are often closest to what's happening in their districts, we set up funding opportunities available for each district office to identify smaller community-based organizations to receive fund directly targeted for food assistance work. So that was one thing. It's similarly, we have a grant process that just launched that's specifically around dollars from the sanctuary fund that we set up. And that process is for organizations that are currently not contracted with the city to provide aid to our immigrant and refugee communities. So those grant dollars are only available to orgs that are not currently contracted with the county. Information about those opportunities can be found on our website. So we have multco.us/federal. That's multco, multco.us/federal. And thank you, Matt, for putting that in the chat so people can have access to that.
Great, thank you. Next question, Chair. How do we get fully transparent data in real time so that we may restore faith in county leadership within our community?
Yeah. Okay. So this is actually an area that I have been really invested in as county chair. I don't know, a lot of people know this, but my background before I went into elected office as a state rep, a county commissioner, now chair, was actually in the technology sector. So I know how important real data is, good information is in our ability to plan and implement work effectively. So one of the things I'm proudest of in my time as chair is the investment made in the number of efforts to improve our data and increase transparency for the public. We have a new homeless services dashboard If you haven't checked that out, please do. I think I think there's a false narrative out there that, it's really hard to understand the work that's happening or what the impact of that work is. And we have a dashboard that is set up that really shows not just the impact of the services that we're doing, but also it gives you information about the population that is being served in Multnomah County. I think one of the things that was really clear as this dashboard went up is that, the inflow, the number of people who are entering houselessness each month compared to the outflow, the number of people who are leaving homelessness, like we have that ratio is off right now. And so we, again, have to be working with our partners around housing investments, looking at key things like eviction prevention and other parts of our system that are adding people to homelessness, as we're also looking on the work that we're doing in the programs and services that help move people from homelessness into housing.
Okay, next question
Wait,
is from
sorry, wait. The other thing, I'm sorry, and I have Christian here, so I don't want to forget this. Christian and her team, as well as county leadership, has done an amazing job of getting our budget information shared very easily and publicly. And you can find out that it's multco.us/budget. Thank you again, Matt, for sharing that information. You can find detailed budget information that will stay updated through our process. So both from the fiscal year that we're now in, as well as we move through the FY27 budget process. And I will say that those are just an example of two of the many dashboards that we have for the county. We have public dashboards that measure our work. We have dashboards around public health issues like fentanyl deaths, impacts of air quality, and many more. So, we have those available on our county website for free and open to the public. And I will say one of the things that we're working on right now in our local public safety coordinating council meetings and in partnership with Commissioner Brim Edwards is looking at how we can provide better data and more connected data about what's happening in our justice systems and public safety systems. And so that's something that we're working on, and we'll hopefully have more on that in FY27.
All right, the next question is from chat. It's a little long, so bear with me.
Okay.
My name is Anna Krasinski. I'm the executive director at Community Warehouse, our region's only nonprofit furniture bank with 2 locations in Multnomah County. I want to ask about equity and how budget cuts are distributed between administrative and direct service costs. When SHS collections fell short last year, all proposed cuts from the county targeted direct service providers. None were proposed for HSD administrative staff. Yet, nonprofit providers are consistently told to cut administrative staff if those admin costs are funded at all. Before touching programs, if programs dollars shrink, shouldn't administrative costs shrink proportionally? Our community depends on our tax revenue going toward actual services, not administering a shrinking portfolio of programs. My question, as we face fiscal year 2027 cuts, will Multnomah County commit to cuts to the Homeless Services Department administrative positions equitably alongside or before direct services that house people and prevent homelessness?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Anna, for this question. And I mean, that is exactly the focus of my very first priority that I talked about earlier, preserving direct services in my budget. So I have asked every single department, Homeless Services Department, but as well as our other departments, to look at the number of things when proposing their 5% constraints this year. So that was something that I asked every department, is knowing that we had a general fund deficit, knowing that we have challenges in other of our revenue sources, including federal funding and SHS. So as they're looking at their budgets and what they're proposing to as cuts, look at administration, look at right sizing programs that grew during the pandemic due to federal funding, that grew because of higher expected business income taxes. Some of the investments that we made in dollars that we no longer have available, and make sure that as we are reducing the programs because of those, we are also, reducing administrative costs and infrastructure proportionately. And in some cases, when looking at, are there places where we've made cuts before and haven't done those administrative costs, like let's dig even deeper there. So I will say that last year, the Homeless Services Department did have to make some reductions in staffing, as did every department. But I really appreciate our labor partners and human resources staff who help us find placements within the county for many employees. So when we do, and what that means is like when we have to do cuts to our employees in staffing levels, that we are looking to how to find places within the county for those impacts. I think for me, the really key thing is the priority of finding the right balance of direct service and administrative investments with the ultimate goal of maximizing the effectiveness of the direct services that we deliver. And so there are some other pieces of work that are happening more across the organization that are also helping us do this work. COO Chris Neal is leading work on a shared services initiative that is really looking at how can we look at the infrastructure that we have across the county in different departments and see where we can find efficiencies and better ways of working in sharing those services and in streamlining some of our internal services. And that not only provides more money for direct services, but it helps us, focus on the work that's being done to provide those direct services to community.
Thank you. All right, next question. What is the current status of Preschool for All? Will the program be impacted by budget cuts?
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to talk about Preschool for All again. So one important thing about Preschool for All is that it has its own voter-approved revenue source that is going to continue to sustain and grow the program as we move to universal access. So no budget cuts or constraints to the general fund are going to affect the work of Preschool for All. To talk a little bit more about that funding source. So approximately about 8% of Multnomah County residents pay into the Preschool for All tax. And that's because this tax is only collected from higher income earners, higher income earners and households in Multnomah County. As I shared before, this is a really exciting year for Preschool for All. Over 7,000 seats are going to be allocated in this next school year. That almost doubles the size of the program from this year that we're in now, and brings us much closer to universal coverage, and also puts us years ahead of schedule in reaching that universal coverage goal. So I'm really proud of the work that's been happening within the Preschool and Early Learning Division to make that possible. The great leadership of Rachel Pearl, who is serving as the interim director of PEL, and getting ready for this year. And I do want to share, we just hired a new director who brings a wealth of experience to the work of preschool and early learning. The new director last worked as a partner for the work that we do at Preschool for All, but was really leading at Mount Hood Community College and the work that they do around early learning and childcare resource and referral. So we're really excited to have Denisa here now leading the work of the Preschool and Early Learning Division. I will say that one thing that's fantastic is that as we're expanding this program, we are also expanding it as a resource for so many families. Preschool for All, as tuition-free preschool seats, are saving families on average of $18,600 per child a year, which is, has a huge economic benefits, not just for those households, but for our entire region. So this is having an impact not just on the next generation that is getting to experience preschool, but also on the families, on the staff, on the workers, on the providers who are part of the program right now. One last plug for Preschool for All. We are having applications for the next school year when we're having all those new seats. That opens up on April 1st, no fooling. So we'll need help promoting the opportunity to sign up to be a part of that big class of Preschool for All. You can request a Preschool for All lawn sign or window sign that directs people to apply at pfa.multco.us. And so want to make sure, and thank you. I see people putting that in the chat for thanks for that. So if you want to share with your friends and neighbors and parents of young kids about the opportunity to apply for next school year, you can go to that. Or if you want to get a lawn sign or a window sign to show your support for Preschool for All, you can find that information there as well. And I did want to mention any of the links that are in the chat. We're also going to send a follow-up email with all of those to the folks who have registered for this town hall today.
That is right. Okay, so the next question, we actually received this question a few times. We know it's important to our community members in Multnomah County. The need to respond to federal immigration is going to be high for the rest of Trump's term. With the cuts, will there be enough funds to support the county's response? And how are you preparing to defend our communities if ICE activities escalate as it did in Minnesota?
Yeah. Thank you for this question. And it is something that I will say that myself and the Board of Commissioners talk about and are concerned about as it impacts the county, as it impacts people in every single district in Multnomah County, as well as our region and state. Um, Continuing to provide aid to our community in the face of a hostile federal administration is going to continue to be a top priority for me. We have taken action as a board, we've taken action as a county, and we're going to continue to take action as needed. So one of the things that I did as chair in December was to declare an emergency, so a declaration of emergency that around the impacts of the federal administration's presence within our community. What that did was two things. One, it allowed us to get funds out the door quicker, and it allowed us to be a little more nimble in how we were able to work with providers and organizations in terms of responding to the need around assistance to our community. The Board of Commissioners, so I'm able to, as chair, I'm able to declare an emergency for 30 days, and then it comes to the board to extend it. And so the board did extend it for an additional 90 days in January. And so because of that declaration of emergency and because of the dollars that were allocated by the Board of Commissioners to respond specifically to this emergency, we have been able to get dollars out the door for food assistance, legal aid, help people paying rent, additional aid to our immigrant and refugee communities. So we were able to not just declare the emergency, but also allocated about $250,000 that would go directly to the folks that are either contracted with us already, or, as I said earlier, the smaller grants program to those organizations who are not. Another way that we are responding at Multnomah County is that for months now, we have set up an emergency command center with representation from every single department that monitors the federal situation and how we can help our community every single day. We have also amped up our communication with community-based organizations to assess their needs and learn how we can help. We have been communicating with our employees at Multnomah County as well, because we know that our employees are also members of the community that are being impacted by what's happening outside. And we're seeing this. We're seeing the impact of this federal occupation in the number of people who are accessing our services, our programs, our healthcare support. So we are constantly working with partners. We're having communication with school systems, with immigrant rights organizations, to bring information to agency leadership on the evolving currents and needs. So we want to stay in communication with our partners. And I will say, despite a difficult budget situation, we're going to continue to be creative to find the resources we can to provide support, and really advocating for support that's needed to respond to this overall. I was just in Salem on Wednesday of this week talking to legislators and legislative leadership about our county priorities, and resources for our immigrant and refugee communities was really right at the top of my list. So I want to make sure that people know what we're doing. I know there's a lot of fear out there because what we're seeing on our streets is should be unthinkable in the United States of America, and we're seeing what's happening in situations or in places like Minnesota and the situations that they're dealing with. So I just want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge the harm that's taking place. And it's for folks and families who are experiencing it themselves, but it also reverberates throughout our communities as well. So I will just flag for you, in early March, the board is going to be taking up a sanctuary status ordinance. That is going to put our into local law our values and have specific provisions to help us guard against these federal attacks. So please stay tuned for more work on that.
Thank you. Okay, switching gears a little bit now. Older adults and the senior population is growing 5 times faster than the total population. Our seniors outnumber children in Oregon. How are you considering funding for our seniors in Multnomah County?
Yeah, so I mean, this is true for Multnomah County. It's true for our state and even for our country that we have an aging population. Um, so, I mean, we've talked about the challenges of the tough economic times that are impacting our government as well as others. I will say, just overall, none of the cuts that we must make to balance our budget are decisions that we want to be making. We know how critical these programs and services are to people in our community, especially those who are being impacted the most by cuts at the federal government level or actions that are taking place, but also folks who have always been more vulnerable to the disparities in our community. So I have been working closely with our Department of County Human Services leadership to prioritize core safety net services with the goal to protect core high impact services. That means emergency housing assistance. So where reductions are being made, we are looking to services that have shown lower levels of effectiveness than others. Again, like really trying to prioritize keeping hold the programs that are really having the best impact on our community, that are being the most effective in our community. And we're also looking at ways that we can leverage federal and state investments to maximize the impact of county funding. So where we have match dollars to do that, I will say a lot of the dollars we get for our services around seniors do come as pass through dollars for federal or state dollars for that. So we are really trying to maximize our ability to use those dollars and put them to work here in our community. So I appreciate you raising this up. Seniors are, one of the populations that are core to the work that we do, especially in DCHS, and will remain will be a priority as we're looking at the budget and coming into shape in this next year.
Thank you. Next question. How is your office planning on supporting eviction prevention programming, knowing it is the most cost-effective, trauma-informed, and reliable pillar of homelessness intervention, especially for families with children?
Yeah, no, eviction prevention is a real key part when we think about our homeless response system. It's critical to reducing the inflow that I talked about earlier, and that's actually one of the primary goals of our homeless response action plan. We just updated that homeless response action plan this summer. It was passed by both the Board of Multnomah County Commissioners and the Portland City Council. So again, alignment there with the work and the goals that we're trying to get to. I will say that one of the things that impacted the dollars that we have this fiscal year that we're currently in around eviction prevention was state cuts to funding around eviction prevention. That has a direct impact on what we're feeling in our local community. So we know, I mean, Christian talked about, and we've had we just had a board meeting about this earlier, about the significant cuts that are going to be needed to our homeless services. But it's important to note that these services have rapidly expanded in recent years, and we're going to have to we'll be able to retain many of the new investments as well. But but for me, the priority is looking at it across the system to see that where we might be overly invested in certain work, that's keeping our system out of balance and being the most effective as possible. And as I said, like, it's going to be important that we're working with our state and our other cities to have a joint investment strategy to prevent duplicating services and ensure that each of us is part of the balancing of the system that has the level of support. I think eviction prevention is key when we're talking about inflow. And I think the other parts of the system where we've seen some cuts that are going to continue to be a priority is are the resources that we have to move people successfully from shelter into housing faster or from the street into housing faster. So again, thinking about it from a system. I will say, like, when COVID happened, we had, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars in eviction prevention because of ARPA that the county focused on. We know, again, that this is an area where the need is still great, and yet we don't have those federal dollars. So it is a tough time, and I appreciate you bringing it up in this question.
Next question. It's our hope that mental and addiction services receive proper funding. Can you talk about your budget approach to these services?
Yes. Funding a mental health, a behavioral health system to ensure that people have the wraparound supports that they need when they're in crisis and when they're seeking treatment is a real big one. I talked a little bit about some of the ways that we're looking across our systems in the one county approach. I think a really key resource that we have at the county for this is our Behavioral Health Resource Center downtown. It's served over 100,000 visitors as of this summer. It's providing drop-in. So the way that it crosses systems is it provides drop-in support for people who are experiencing homelessness. It provides respite and anything from a shower, a washer and dryer, peer support, which is where it really crosses over into the behavioral health support that folks need as well. We have continued to see investments in overdose prevention, and we've seen a big decline in fentanyl overdoses, and I think that is a part of that. I will say that the opioid crisis, particularly the fentanyl epidemic that we saw really ramp up in 2022 and really peak in 2023, that has placed an immense burden on our community. I'm acutely aware of the needs for additional sobering and withdrawal services. We've seen that through the investments that the county has made to some of our provider partners in increasing the capacity for both inpatient and outpatient treatment in our community. And I'm very invested in the county's plan to open a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week sobering and crisis stabilization center, which is going to provide sobering services, detox for folks, or withdrawal management. That planning for that center began in 2024. Leaders from behavioral health, our law enforcement community, and local governments came together to talk about what that program model needs to look like. We're planning on opening that on fall 2027. This is something that is serving not just Multnomah County, but also providing support and addressing needs that are also being experienced by law enforcement partners in other cities and jurisdictions. So really, it's really important that we have partnership as this facility comes online. And also a part of that sobering and crisis stabilization center is going to be deflection. The deflection would be housed there as well, the deflection program. And this really offers a path to treatment and recovery supports for folks who would otherwise be arrested for drug possession of a personal amount of drugs. What the program that we have and will continue to have allows law enforcement to make a warm handoff to link people to the programs and services, especially substance use disorder services that are going to be key to helping people get on a path to stability and health. So I think that these are some of the ways, but I think as we're, again, just like with the homeless response system, as we're thinking about our behavioral health system, really understanding the investments across our system, working with our partners like in healthcare, like Care Oregon and HealthShare with our state partners to really, understand the ways and be in communication about the ways is that our system is impacted by their systems and how we can all be working together to mitigate the impact of cuts and continue to support a system that is serving some of our most vulnerable community members.
We have about 3 questions left. These questions are definitely showing the depth and breadth of the work at the county. And now we're going to do kind of a 180. Given the well-documented devastating environmental, social, economic, educational, and artistic impacts of data centers, particularly those supporting AI, is your office planning to take a strong stance against its use in county work and beyond?
Oh, this is definitely somebody who has an opinion. I appreciate this question and the perspective. Multnomah County, I will say our Multnomah County IT team in our Department of Community Assets has really, I think, rung the bell early on about the potential impacts of AI. We have had an AI community of practice led by a county steering team for over 3 years now. The work over those 3 years has been over 500 hours and about 70 staff from across our organization to really support research, training, and policy development about the use of AI for Multnomah County. Part of that work led to the development of responsible AI principles aligned to Multnomah County's mission, vision, and values, really tied closely to our moral compass. We also have policies and training around generative AI use and procedures. And that's really, the emphasis there is on emphasizing privacy and sensitive information around that. So wanting to be clear. And I will say that we are seeing some positive impacts of AI use, especially in the health department. Our health department has 34 DAX Copilot licenses that are used to automatically document patient-provider interactions. Those are used mostly at our Multnomah County by our Multnomah County Health Center clinicians, but it's helping really cut down on some of the administrative work that they need to do so that they have more time and capacity to be focused on patient care. In reports back, providers are reporting time savings, improved focus, improved clinical care, and better work-life balance. I want to be clear, though, that as somebody who has worked both in technology and has done much work around climate and environmental issues in my time as an elected official, should climate impacts be considered by the steering team? Yes, absolutely. And I really, and so this needs to be, I think, is also aligned with our county values around the environmental impacts of the work that we do. So really appreciate the question, and I'm happy to be able to share some of what the work has looked like at Multnomah County. And again, just giving kudos to our leadership in IT on how they're trying to take a responsible approach to AI.
Great. Next question is, when can staff expect to see equity meaningfully incorporated into budget decisions in a way that addresses current disparities impacting employees? For example, staff having to pay out of pocket for parking due to limited county transportation and parking options.
Yeah, so appreciate this question. So every budget decision is reviewed with an equity lens by department leadership in partnership with their equity manager. So when departments come and talk to me about what they're proposing for their budget, whether that's cuts or new programs, they have to be able to explain to me how equity is impacting the decisions that they're making. I take the equity statements that are submitted by the departments on their budgets very seriously and want to see those statements in the work and in their proposals that they have given to me. We have a number of ways to discuss issues like parking with staff, including the communications and the work that we do with our county labor unions. We have 8 different unions at Multnomah County. We have employee resource groups as well. So those are just a couple ways that issues like this can be discussed. I will, and then every single department has equity managers who have a countywide roundtable where these issues can also come to light and be raised up to the COO and county leadership. We are in the process right now. We are finalizing bargaining agreements that also take these issues into consideration and into account as part of that process. And I will say that we're continuing to have conversations and implementation of those agreements, as well as the ways that those agreements are reflecting the values that have come out of those discussions.
Great. This is our last question, and it is focusing on public safety. And the question is, last year, the sheriff's office and the district attorney did not take any cuts. How will you approach those budgets this year?
Yes. So this year, as part of the budget guidance given, I've asked all departments to propose a 5% reduction for me to consider in putting together my budget, which will come out in April. The county's public safety functions are always a high priority to me. I think this public safety is also an area where we have a lot of legal requirements in terms of what we as a county have to do to align with state law. I will say that the DA's budget did see a large expansion in recent years, including last year. There were some amendments that were made at the last part of our budget process when the budget came before the commissioners, and there were additions that were made to the DA's budget there too. So this is something that again, as we're looking at the impacts of the budget constraints that we have this year, I think it needs to be shared throughout our organization, and so that's the direction that I've asked for this year. For folks putting forward what they're proposing to reduce to meet those constraints. we're going to be able to retain many resources, in I think in our public safety worlds, but there is also needs to be a shared responsibility to be fiscally responsible, to go through the constraints that are facing all county departments. And we have had public safety investments beyond the DA's and sheriff's office as well. So we have our Department of Community Justice, which does parole services, that does provides juvenile work around public safety, probation work. These are also investments that can help prevent higher costs down the line by keeping people out of jail while still providing accountability. And that's really, and as we think about like the priorities of what we're seeing in our public safety and criminal justice systems, it's really about how we are acting to lower recidivism, prevent future criminal activity, and making our communities safer. One of the things that I would hope, not just for Multnomah County, but for our country as a whole, is that, we really should be, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be, one of the safest countries in the world that also has the lowest prison population in the world. We are far from that right now. But I do think that as we're looking at, and one thing that's important to me in making budget decisions is we can't just be thinking about the crisis that's in front of us. We have to be also thinking about those investments that allow us to do upstream work that prevents the impacts to some of the systems that we see right now. That's why I'm such a believer in preschool for all, but also, programs about youth workforce opportunities and others that really help us, do the work that is needed upstream to prevent the need for really crisis intervention that we see in other parts of our systems, including our public safety systems.
Well, thank you so much, Chair Vega-Peterson, for answering those questions today. I'm just going to give you a minute to take a breath before closing us out from this budget discussion today.
All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate the time that you've taken today. For those of you who joined us today, I know more people will watch this online as it becomes, so we'll post it to my chair's office budget website. But this is a practice. Having this town hall is something that I started as chair because, as when I was a commissioner, we always heard from the public during the public budget hearings. There was lots of opportunities, but coming as chair, there's so much of the work that happens at the budget before we even get to that point. And as I'm making decisions about the budget that I'm going to be proposing, I wanted to make sure that I'm hearing directly from the public about your concerns, about your priorities, about where you would like to see investment made. In addition to the work that's happening today, we have the survey that's up. I've also been meeting with a lot of our providers, community partners, stakeholders in other systems like school districts to get their thoughts and to get their perspectives as I'll be making decisions. So all of this is really critical to me as we're moving through this budget process, and I'm making decisions that are really difficult ones in a constrained environment, but still have to reflect our priorities and values as a county, as a community. So thank you all so much for today. And again, we'll be sharing the links after this meeting is done. We will be following up with that. And there's lots more ways that you can engage in our county budget process as we move through budget adoption, which will happen in early June. Thank you.
All right, Tasia, thank you. I think you can end our call now.